Have you ever met someone who thought they were untouchable? Someone who thrived on belittling others just because they had a uniform and a badge? Meet Bethany Crisp. She was the queen bee of Sky Summit Airways, a flight attendant who treated the cabin like a personal kingdom and the passengers like peasants. But on Flight 802 from New York to London, Bethany made a fatal calculation. She looked at a quiet, casually dressed black woman in seat 4A and saw a target. She didn't see the truth. She didn't know that the woman she just slapped across the face wasn't just a passenger. She was the new owner of the entire airline. And what happened next wasn't just justice. It was a total destruction of ego. The rain lashed against the reinforced glass of JFK's Terminal 4, turning the runway lights into smeared streaks of amber and red. Inside the exclusive lounge, the air smelled of expensive cologne and espresso. But Aaliyah Vance wasn't sitting in the lounge. She was sitting at the chaotic, overcrowded Gate B-22, her hood pulled up over a simple black wrap, looking more like a tired college student than the woman who had just closed a $4.2 billion acquisition deal 48 hours ago. Aaliyah adjusted her noise-cancelling headphones, but she wasn't playing music. She was listening to the gate agents. I don't care if the stroller doesn't fit, just check it. God, these people are so needy today. A sharp, nasal voice cut through the ambient noise. Aaliyah shifted her gaze behind her dark sunglasses. The voice belonged to a tall, striking blonde flight attendant with a severe bun and a uniform that was tailored a little too tightly. Her name tag read, Bethany. She was currently looming over a young mother who looked on the verge of tears. "Please," the mother stammered, holding a crying infant. "It fits in the overhead. I've flown with it before." "Not on my plane, it doesn't," Bethany snapped, checking her manicured nails. "Gate check it or don't fly. I don't have time to babysit you and your luggage. We're already 10 minutes behind." Aaliyah watched the interaction with cold, analytical eyes. She pulled out her phone, a cracked iPhone 11 she used specifically for these undercover audits, and typed a note. Gate Agent F.A. Bethany Crisp. Attitude, hostile. Customer service, non-existent. This was why Aaliyah was here. Sky Summit Airways was a legacy carrier, once the pride of the skies, but in the last 5 years, its reputation had tanked. Stocks were down, complaints were up, and rumors of a toxic internal culture were rampant. Aaliyah Vance, a self-made tech mogul who had clawed her way up from the projects of Chicago to the boardrooms of Silicon Valley, didn't buy companies to let them fail. She bought them to clean house, and she had a feeling the house was very, very dirty. "Zone 1, First Class and Diamond members, you may now board," the gate agent announced. Aaliyah waited. She had a first-class ticket, but she had specifically requested to be unlisted from the manifest's VIP status. To the crew, she was just A. Vance, a nobody who probably used miles to upgrade. As she approached the gate, she scanned her boarding pass. The machine beeped blue. Bethany was standing at the jet bridge entrance, greeting passengers. "Good evening, Mr. Henderson. Welcome back," Bethany cooed to the elderly white man in a bespoke suit ahead of Aaliyah. Her smile was blindingly bright, fake but effective. Then Aaliyah stepped up. Bethany's smile vanished instantly. She looked Aaliyah up and down, her eyes lingering on the comfortable, non-branded hoodie and the lack of visible jewelry. "Boarding pass," Bethany demanded, her hand extended, palm open, not even making eye contact. Aaliyah held out her phone. Bethany scanned it, her brow furrowing, when she saw the seat assignment. 4A? "You're in first?" Bethany let out a scoff that was barely disguised as a cough. "Let me see that again." She snatched the phone from Aaliyah's hand, scrolling through the screen. "Is there a problem?" Aaliyah asked, her voice calm, a smooth alto, that usually commanded silence in boardrooms. "The problem is usually people trying to sneak into cabins they didn't pay for," Bethany muttered. She shoved the phone back into Aaliyah's chest, hard enough to be rude, soft enough to be deniable. "Go. Turn left. Don't block the aisle for the paying customers." Paying customers? Aaliyah took the phone, her expression unreadable. "Thank you, Bethany. Have a lovely flight." Bethany rolled her eyes, already turning her attention to the man behind Aaliyah. "Welcome aboard, sir. Love that watch." Aaliyah walked down the jet bridge, the damp smell of jet fuel filling her nose. Her heart wasn't racing from anger. It was beating with the steady, heavy rhythm of a judge about to pass a sentence. She stepped onto the aircraft, the Boeing 777 that she technically owned, and turned left into the first-class cabin. It was luxurious, certainly. Wide leather seats, champagne already bubbling in flutes. Aaliyah found 4A, a window seat. She stowed her modest duffel bag and sat down. Across the aisle in 4B sat a man who looked like he owned a yacht. He was already demanding a refill on his pre-flight drink. The flight attendant serving him was younger, nervous. "Sarah, get the towel, you spilled a drop," Bethany's voice carried from the galley. She stormed into the cabin, pushing the younger attendant aside. "Honestly, do I have to do everything myself?" Bethany wiped the microscopic droplet from the man's tray table, beaming at him. "So sorry about that, sir. New hire. You know how it is. Hard to find good help." The man chuckled. "You're a saint, Bethany." "I try, Mr. Sterling. I try." Bethany turned and finally acknowledged Aaliyah. She didn't offer a drink. She didn't offer a hot towel. She simply pointed to Aaliyah's bag, which was slightly sticking out from under the seat. "That needs to go up. Now." "It fits under the seat," Aaliyah said, looking at the safety card. "It's within the dimensions." "I said up," Bethany snapped, leaning over Aaliyah's personal space. "I don't want to trip over your mess when I'm doing service. Or do you want me to check it to the hold? I'm sure it'll get lost nicely down there." The threat was subtle, but clear. "Do what I say, or I will make your flight a nightmare." Aaliyah met Bethany's eyes. They were ice blue and filled with a profound, unearned superiority. Aaliyah stood up slowly. She was taller than Bethany, a fact that seemed to annoy the flight attendant even more. Without a word, Aaliyah lifted the bag and placed it in the overhead bin, latching it shut with a firm click. "Happy?" Aaliyah asked. Bethany sneered, ecstatic. "Sit down." As Aaliyah buckled her seatbelt, she saw Bethany whisper something to the other flight attendant, Sarah. They both looked at Aaliyah. Sarah looked sympathetic. Bethany looked malicious. The engines roared to life, the plane pushing back from the gate. Aaliyah looked out the window at the rain-streaked tarmac. She closed her eyes. "Enjoy the power trip while it lasts, Bethany," she thought, "because we have 7 hours across the Atlantic. And you have no idea who is sitting in seat 4A. 2 hours into the flight, the cabin lights were dimmed to a soft, relaxing violet hue. The hum of the engines was a steady drone, usually enough to lull passengers to sleep. But in the first-class cabin of Flight 802, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Aaliyah had been deliberately ignored for the entirety of the meal service. While Mr. Sterling in 4B had received his 3-course meal, warmed nuts, and 3 refills of scotch, Aaliyah had received a cold roll and a glass of water. And she had to ring the call button twice to get that. She hadn't complained. She hadn't made a scene. She was documenting. Every timestamp, every sneer, every bypassed service standard was being catalogued in her mind. Around 11 p.m. GMT, the turbulence hit. It wasn't dangerous, just the choppy, jarring bumps typical of a winter crossing over the North Atlantic. The seatbelt sign pinged on with a decisive chime. Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has turned on the fasten seatbelt sign. Please return to your seats, the PA system announced. Aaliyah was thirsty. Her water glass had been empty for an hour. She pressed the call button. Nothing happened. She waited 5 minutes. She pressed it again. Finally, Bethany appeared from the front galley. She didn't look like a service professional. She looked like a bouncer at a club who had just been asked a stupid question. "What?" Bethany demanded, not bothering to lower her voice. "I'd like some water, please," Aaliyah said softly. "We're in turbulence." "Sit down," Bethany hissed. "You're walking around. The carts are secured. I just need a bottle of water." And I said wait. Bethany turned her back on Aaliyah to chat with Mr. Sterling, who was laughing loudly about a golf game. "Can I get you a top-up, Mr. Sterling? I know you hate flying dry." "You're the best, Beth," Sterling slurred slightly. Aaliyah watched in disbelief as Bethany walked to the galley, retrieved a glass of scotch, and brought it back to the white man across the aisle. During the same turbulence she claimed prevented her from serving water. Aaliyah unbuckled her seatbelt. This was a safety violation, a service violation, and a clear display of discriminatory behavior. She needed to speak to the purser, the lead flight attendant, assuming Bethany wasn't the purser. Aaliyah stood up. "Sit down," Bethany shouted, spinning around. The sudden movement, combined with a jolt of turbulence, caused the glass of scotch in her hand to slosh. Amber liquid flew out, splashing onto Bethany's pristine white blouse and dripping onto Mr. Sterling's expensive loafers. The cabin went silent. Bethany froze. She looked at the stain on her shirt, then at the empty glass, and then her eyes snapped up to Aaliyah. The look on her face was pure, unadulterated hatred. "Look what you did!" Bethany shrieked. "I didn't touch you," Aaliyah said, holding her hands up calmly. The plane jolted. "You startled me. You got out of your seat when I gave you a direct order." Bethany marched toward Aaliyah, invading her personal space. "You people are always the same. You think the rules don't apply to you because you bought a ticket?" "Excuse me?" Aaliyah's voice dropped an octave, turning deadly cold. "What do you mean, you people?" "Unruly passengers." Bethany backtracked, but the venom was palpable. "Ghetto, entitled, disruptive passengers who have no business in this cabin." The racial coding was so loud it was practically screaming. Several passengers gasped. Mr. Sterling looked uncomfortable, pretending to be asleep. Sarah, the junior flight attendant, peeked out from the curtain, eyes wide with terror. "Bethany," Sarah whispered. "Stop!" "Shut up, Sarah!" Bethany snapped without looking back. She turned her fury back to Aaliyah. "You are going to sit down. You are going to shut your mouth. And when we land, I am having the police waiting for you. Assaulting a crew member is a federal offense." "I didn't assault anyone," Aaliyah stated firmly. "And I would suggest you lower your voice and check the manifest again before you make a mistake you can't fix." "Are you threatening me?" Bethany let out a jagged laugh. "You think I'm scared of you? I'm the authority on this plane. Me, not you." "You're a server in the sky, Bethany. Do your job," Aaliyah said. It was a low blow, perhaps, but Aaliyah was done being diplomatic. That broke Bethany. The veneer of professionalism didn't just crack, it shattered. Bethany's face turned a violent shade of crimson. "Who do you think you are talking to?" "I'm talking to an employee who is about to be very unemployed," Aaliyah said. Bethany's hand moved before Aaliyah could react. It was a reaction born of rage, entitlement, and the absolute certainty that she would be believed over a black woman in a hoodie. Crack. The sound was like a gunshot in the pressurized cabin. Bethany's palm connected hard with Aaliyah's left cheek. Ideally, Aaliyah would have caught the hand, like in a movie. But in real life, shock slows you down. Aaliyah's head whipped to the right. A sting, sharp and hot, bloomed across her face. The silence that followed was heavier than the plane itself. Aaliyah didn't scream. She didn't fight back. She slowly turned her head back to face Bethany. Her cheek was already swelling, a red handprint visible against her dark skin. Aaliyah's eyes were dry. She looked at Bethany with a terrifying calmness. It was the look of a predator watching prey that had just foolishly injured itself. Bethany was breathing hard, her hand still raised slightly, trembling. For a second, regret flashed in her eyes, not for the violence, but for the witnesses. Then, she doubled down. "She hit me!" Bethany screamed, clutching her own chest, pivoting to the passengers. "Did you see that? She tried to hit me and I defended myself. She's crazy." Aaliyah stood perfectly still. She reached into her pocket. "She's got a weapon!" Bethany shrieked, backing away. Aaliyah pulled out her phone. She wasn't calling 911. She was hitting record. "Captain," Aaliyah said, her voice projecting clearly through the cabin. "I need the captain, now." "You aren't seeing anyone but the inside of a jail cell." Bethany lunged for the intercom phone on the wall. "Captain Sterling to the cabin! Captain to the cabin! We have a level 4 threat. Passenger is violent." Aaliyah looked into the camera lens of her phone, capturing Bethany's frantic lying face, and then turned the camera to her own swelling cheek. November 26th. Aaliyah whispered to the recording. Flight 802. Assault by senior crew member. Let the games begin. The cockpit door buzzed. The cockpit door didn't just open, it burst open. Captain Marcus Miller emerged, a man in his late 50s with silver hair and the kind of jawline that suggested he was used to being obeyed without question. He wore his 4 stripes like armor. Behind him, the first officer peeked out, looking anxious. "What is going on back here?" Miller barked, his voice booming over the hum of the engines. "I have a report of an assault on a crew member." The scene he walked into was a tableau of chaos. Bethany was leaning against the galley bulkhead, sobbing theatrically into a napkin, her other hand clutching her chest. Aaliyah stood by her seat, phone in hand, her face stoic, but her left cheek visibly swelling, turning a dark, angry purple against her skin. Bethany saw the captain and immediately launched her performance. "Marcus! Oh God, Marcus, she's crazy!" She pointed a shaking finger at Aaliyah. "I told her to sit down because of the turbulence, and she snapped. She threw her drink at Mr. Sterling and then she slapped me. She tried to push past me to the cockpit." It was a lie so audacious, so completely detached from reality, that Aaliyah almost laughed. But she didn't. She knew exactly how this worked. Captain Miller looked at Bethany, a woman he had flown with for 10 years, a woman he probably grabbed drinks with at layover hotels. Then he looked at Aaliyah, a stranger in a hoodie, standing in a cabin she didn't belong in. He turned his body toward Aaliyah, his posture aggressive. "Is this true?" "No," Aaliyah said, her voice steady. "It is a complete fabrication. If you look at the cameras—" "There are no cameras in the cabin, Mom," Miller cut her off sharply. "And I don't need cameras when I have a senior crew member in distress." "She slapped me," Aaliyah said, moving her hand to reveal her cheek fully. "Look at my face. She assaulted a passenger. I began recording after the incident. I have witnesses." Miller glanced at the passengers. The cabin was silent. People were terrified. To speak up against the captain and the head flight attendant at 35,000 feet required a level of courage most people simply didn't possess. "Mr. Sterling?" Miller turned to the wealthy man in 4B. "You were right there. What happened?" This was the moment. The truth hung in the balance. Arthur Sterling looked at his Scotch glass. He looked at Bethany, who was looking at him with wide, pleading, tear-filled eyes, the same eyes that had been flirting with him for 3 hours. Then he looked at Aaliyah, the woman who had disrupted his relaxing flight. Sterling cleared his throat. Well, Captain, it happened very fast. The woman, the passenger in 4A, she was very aggressive. She stood up. Bethany tried to stop her. There was a struggle. I think yes. I think she did strike the stewardess. A collective gasp went through the back of the cabin, but nobody spoke. You are a liar, Aaliyah said to Sterling. She didn't shout. She just stated it as a fact. That's enough. Captain Miller stepped into Aaliyah's personal space. Ma'am, under the Tokyo Convention and federal aviation laws, you are interfering with a flight crew. You are a threat to the safety of this aircraft. I am the victim here, Aaliyah insisted, though she could feel the walls closing in. Captain, I am asking you to de-escalate this. Check my phone. I have a recording of her admitting. Give me the phone, Miller demanded, holding out his hand. No, Aaliyah said, gripping it tighter. This is evidence. I said, give me the phone. Miller lunged. Aaliyah twisted away, but Miller was stronger. He grabbed her wrist, twisting it painfully until her fingers spasmed and the phone dropped. Bethany, miraculously recovered from her trauma, swooped in and snatched the device from the floor. I'll hold on to this, Bethany sneered, slipping it into her apron pocket, for safety. That is theft, Aaliyah said, her eyes burning into the captain. You are making a mistake that will cost you your career. Do you know who I am? Captain Miller laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. I know exactly who you are. You're a disruptive passenger in seat 4A, and you're done. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a pair of thick, yellow plastic flex cuffs. Zip ties. Turn around, Miller ordered. You have got to be kidding me, Aaliyah whispered. Turn around, or I will have the passengers assist me in restraining you, Miller shouted. Aaliyah looked at the faces around her. Some looked away in shame. Others, like Sterling, looked vindicated. She realized fighting physically would only validate their narrative. It would give them the excuse they needed to hurt her more. She turned around. She felt the cold plastic bite into her wrists. Miller didn't be gentle. He cinched them tight. Too tight. The circulation to her hands was immediately restricted. Bethany, move her to the back, Miller ordered. I don't want her in first class. Put her in the jump seat in the rear galley, and have Sarah watch her like a hawk. If she moves, if she speaks, I want to know. With pleasure, Captain, Bethany said. She grabbed Aaliyah by the bicep, digging her nails in. Come on, walk. Aaliyah was marched down the length of the plane. They passed through business class, then premium economy, and finally into the crowded economy cabin. Hundreds of eyes followed them. Is that a terrorist? Someone whispered. She must be drunk, another muttered. Why is she in handcuffs? Aaliyah kept her head high. She locked eyes with anyone who looked at her. She didn't cry. She didn't stumble. She walked with the dignity of a queen being led to the guillotine, knowing that the guillotine was broken. They reached the rear galley. Bethany shoved Aaliyah into the small, uncomfortable crew jump seat near the lavatories. Sit, Bethany commanded. She strapped Aaliyah in, tightening the seatbelt across her chest until it was hard to breathe. Enjoy the flight, Bethany whispered, her lips brushing Aaliyah's ear. I'm going to go finish my service. I'll make sure to write up a very detailed report for the police. Bethany turned and strutted back toward the front of the plane, swaying her hips, victorious. Aaliyah sat alone in the dim light of the galley, the roar of the engines louder back here. Her cheek throbbed, her wrists burned, her heart was a cold block of ice. Report, Aaliyah thought. Oh, Bethany, you have no idea what a report looks like yet. The next 4 hours were an exercise in psychological torture. The rear galley was freezing. The draft from the emergency exit door seeped through Aaliyah's hoodie, chilling her to the bone. Because her hands were zip-tied behind her back, she couldn't adjust her clothing. She couldn't rub her arms. She couldn't even wipe the single tear that finally escaped her eye. Not from sadness, but from the sheer, physical pain of the restraints. She became an exhibit. Passengers coming to use the lavatories would stop and stare. "What did she do?" a teenager asked his dad. "Stay away from her, Jimmy. She's dangerous," the father replied, pulling his son closer. Aaliyah stared at the metal latch of the food cart in front of her. She began to meditate. She went to her palace, the mental state she used during hostile takeovers and board meetings. She needed to compartmentalize the rage, or it would consume her. Step 1. Survival. Endure the flight. Step 2. Documentation. Memorize everything. Step 3. Annihilation. Legal, financial, and professional destruction of everyone involved. About 2 hours before landing, Sarah, the junior flight attendant, came to the back. She looked pale and shaken. She checked to make sure no other crew members were around. "Mom?" Sarah whispered. Aaliyah looked up. Her eyes were bloodshot. "I brought you some water." Sarah held a plastic cup with a straw. She looked terrified, glancing over her shoulder every 2 seconds. "I can't undo the cuffs. I'm sorry. Bethany has the cutter. But you need to drink." Sarah held the cup to Aaliyah's lips. Aaliyah drank greedily. It was lukewarm, but it felt like life itself. "Thank you, Sarah," Aaliyah rasped. "I saw it," Sarah whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "I saw her hit you. I know you didn't do anything." "Then why didn't you speak up?" Aaliyah asked gently. She wasn't accusing. She was asking. I'm on probation," Sarah stammered. "Bethany is the senior lead. If I go against her, she'll write me up. I'll lose my wings. I have student loans. I can't lose this job." "You won't lose your job," Aaliyah said. "But you have a choice to make, Sarah. When we land, the police will come. You can either tell the truth then, or you can go down with Bethany." Sarah bit her lip. "I'm scared of her. She's dating the chief pilot's brother. She's untouchable." "Nobody is untouchable," Aaliyah said. "Listen to me closely, Sarah. I need you to do something for me. Do you have a pen?" "Yes. Write this down. Case number 409, Alpha Vance." "What is that?" "Just write it on your hand. If they separate us, you give that number to the first suit you see on the ground. Can you do that?" Sarah nodded, quickly scribbling the code on her palm with a ballpoint pen. Just then, the curtain ripped open. Bethany was back. "Sarah!" Bethany barked. "What are you doing? Fraternizing with the prisoner?" Sarah jumped back, hiding her hand behind her back. She asked for water. Humanitarian guidelines say—" "I don't care what the guidelines say," Bethany snapped. "Get to the front. Duty-free is starting. I'll handle her." Sarah fled. Bethany stood over Aaliyah, a cruel smile playing on her lips. She held up Aaliyah's phone. "You have a lot of interesting contacts in here," Bethany said, scrolling. "Lawyers, investors, board of directors. Who are you, really? Some kind of high-end escort? A scammer?" "I am the person who pays your salary," Aaliyah said quietly. Bethany laughed, a loud, cackling sound. "Honey, you can't even afford a seat in first class without acting like a savage. You pay nothing." She leaned in close, her perfume cloying and sweet. "I deleted the video, by the way. Oops. Fat fingers." Aaliyah's stomach dropped. That video was her primary evidence, but she kept her face impassive. "Deleting evidence is a felony," Aaliyah said. "It's my word against yours," Bethany whispered. "And I have the captain, and a billionaire witness, and a deleted video. You have nothing. When we land in London, the Metropolitan Police are going to take you to a holding cell. You'll be deported, banned from flying. Your life is over." "We'll see," Aaliyah said. "Yes," Bethany smirked, straightening up and smoothing her skirt. "We certainly will." She turned on her heel and walked away, leaving Aaliyah in the darkness of the galley. Aaliyah closed her eyes. She breathed in. She breathed out. Deleted. That was a problem. But Bethany didn't know about the cloud backup, and she certainly didn't know that Aaliyah's phone was a custom encrypted device that automatically uploaded all media to a secure server the moment it was recorded, provided there was a connection. Aaliyah looked up at the Wi-Fi indicator light on the ceiling. It was blinking green. Gotcha. "Cabin crew, prepare for landing." The descent into London. Heathrow was smooth, but Aaliyah's body was screaming in agony. Her shoulders were locked in a spasm from hours in the restraints. Her wrists were numb. As the plane taxied to the gate, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to London. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We have authorities meeting the aircraft to remove a security threat. Once the police have cleared the cabin, we will commence disembarkation. Thank you for your patience." The security threat. That was her. The plane jolted to a halt. The seatbelt sign pinged off, but nobody moved. The tension was palpable. From her vantage point in the rear galley, Aaliyah couldn't see the front door, but she heard the commotion. Heavy boots thumping on the floorboards, the crackle of radios. Bethany came rushing back to the rear, accompanied by 2 large officers from the London Metropolitan Police. She looked triumphant, like a hunter showing off a kill. "That's her," Bethany pointed at Aaliyah. "She's been restrained for 4 hours. Extremely volatile." One of the officers, a stern man with a thick beard, stepped forward. "Ma'am, I am Constable Evans. You are under arrest for suspicion of assault on a flight crew member and endangering the safety of an aircraft." He pulled out a knife and cut the zip ties. The pain of the blood rushing back into Aaliyah's hands was excruciating. She gasped, doubling over. "Stand up," the officer ordered. He grabbed her arm, spinning her around to cuff her with real metal handcuffs this time. "I need to speak to—" Aaliyah started. "You can speak at the station," Constable Evans said. "Right now, you are coming with us." They marched her forward. This was the walk of shame Bethany had engineered. They dragged Aaliyah down the entire length of the plane again, past the staring faces in economy, past the hushed whispers in business. When they reached first class, Bethany was standing there with Captain Miller and Mr. Sterling. They were all watching her with looks of disgust and pity. "Disgraceful," Sterling muttered, shaking his head. "Good riddance," Captain Miller said, crossing his arms. "Officer, I'll have my full report filed within the hour." "Thank you, Captain," the officer nodded. They led Aaliyah to the open aircraft door. The cold English air hit her face. It was crisp and smelled of rain. But as they stepped onto the jet bridge, the dynamic changed instantly. Usually, a jet bridge is empty except for a few ground staff. Today, the jet bridge was crowded. Standing right at the end of the tunnel, blocking the path to the terminal, was a phalanx of people in dark suits. 6 of them. They weren't police. They were corporate sharks. In the center stood a man Aaliyah recognized immediately. Julian Thorne, the chief legal officer for Sky Summit Airways' European division. Next to him was the station manager for Heathrow, looking pale and sweating profusely. And flanking them were 2 men holding a tablet and a portable biometric scanner. Constable Evans stopped. "Here, clear the way. Police business." Julian Thorne stepped forward. He didn't look at the police officer. He looked straight at Aaliyah, his eyes widening in horror as he saw the handcuffs and the swollen bruise on her face. "Ms. Vance." Julian's voice trembled. Aaliyah stopped. She straightened her spine despite the cuffs. She looked at Julian with a gaze that could peel paint. "Julian," Aaliyah said calmly, "I seem to be in a bit of a predicament." "Uncuff her!" Julian barked at the police officer. "Right now." Constable Evans bristled. "Excuse me, who are you? This woman is a suspect in a level 4 assault." "This woman," Julian shouted, his composure breaking, "is the owner and CEO of this airline. You are currently arresting the person who owns the plane you are standing on." The silence that followed was absolute. Captain Miller and Bethany had followed them onto the jet bridge to watch the show. They froze. Bethany's smug smile faltered. "What?" Julian turned his fury on the crew. "Captain Miller, did you authorize these restraints?" Miller stammered. She assaulted Bethany. She was a threat. I didn't know." "You didn't know?" Aaliyah spoke up. Her voice was quiet, but it echoed in the metal tunnel. "You didn't check the manifest properly? You didn't listen when I told you to check the cameras? You didn't listen when I told you who I was?" She turned to the police officer. "Constable, I am not resisting, but I would advise you to check the tablet that man is holding. It contains the incorporation documents and the acquisition papers finalized 48 hours ago. I am Aaliyah Vance. I own Sky Summit, and I would like to file charges for assault, false imprisonment, and defamation." She turned slowly to face Bethany. Bethany Crisp looked like she had seen a ghost. Her skin went grey. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The phone, Aaliyah's phone, was still in her apron pocket. It suddenly felt very heavy. "Hello, Bethany," Aaliyah said, a small, terrifying smile touching her lips. "I believe you have my phone." The silence on the jet bridge was the kind of heavy, suffocating quiet that usually precedes a natural disaster. The damp English wind whipped through the gap in the fuselage seal, whistling a low, mournful tune. Julian Thorne, the chief legal officer, stepped forward. His face was a mask of professional terror. He wasn't just afraid of Aaliyah, he was afraid of the lawsuit that was currently handcuffed in front of him. "Constable," Julian said, his voice shaking, "I am verifying the identity of this woman. She is Ms. Aaliyah Vance. She acquired Sky Summit Airways via her holding company, Vance Global, on Tuesday. She is the chairwoman of the board." Constable Evans looked at the tablet Julian displayed. He looked at the passport photo on the screen, then at the woman in the handcuffs. He looked at the bruised cheek. He looked at the terrified flight attendant and the pale captain. The color drained from Evans's face. He realized he had just walked into a minefield. "Uncuff her," Evans ordered his partner. "Now." The metal clicked. The cuffs fell away. Aaliyah didn't rub her wrists immediately. She didn't wince. She simply let her arms fall to her sides and took a deep breath, reclaiming her space. She wasn't the prisoner anymore. She was the executioner. "Thank you," Aaliyah said, her voice raspy but commanding. She turned her gaze to Bethany. Bethany Crisp was trembling. It started in her hands and spread to her knees. She was witnessing the impossible. The ghetto passenger she had tortured for 7 hours wasn't just rich. She was God in this airline's universe. "That's a lie," Bethany squeaked, her voice cracking. "Anyone can fake a document. Marcus, tell them. She's deranged." Captain Miller didn't speak. He was doing mental math, calculating his pension, his mortgage, and the fact that he had just authorized the binding of his new boss. He took a subtle step away from Bethany. "My phone," Aaliyah said, extending her hand. "Bethany, give me my phone." "I don't have it," Bethany lied, her hand instinctively covering her apron pocket. "Constable Evans," Aaliyah said, without looking away from Bethany. "That woman has stolen my personal property, which contains evidence of a felony. If she does not hand it over in 3 seconds, I would like you to search her." Evans stepped forward, His demeanor completely changed. "Ma'am, hand over the device." Bethany looked at the police, looked at the captain who was staring at the floor, and slowly, shakily, pulled the cracked iPhone out of her pocket. She dropped it into Aaliyah's hand. "It doesn't matter," Bethany whispered, a flash of her old arrogance returning. "I deleted the video. It's gone. It's your word against mine, and I have the captain and Mr. Sterling." Aaliyah wiped the screen on her hoodie. She unlocked the phone. She tapped the blue icon of her cloud storage app. "Bethany," Aaliyah said softly, "do you know what 5G roaming is?" She turned the screen around so the police officers, Julian and the captain, could see. There it was. The video file, time-stamped, uploaded. Aaliyah pressed play. The audio was crisp. "Who do you think you are talking to?" Bethany's voice screamed from the tiny speakers. Then, the movement, the flash of the hand, crack. The sound of the slap was sickeningly loud. Then, the lie. "She hit me. Did you see that?" The video showed Aaliyah standing perfectly still, hands at her sides, while Bethany assaulted her and then immediately fabricated a story. The silence returned, but this time it was different. It was the silence of guilt. Constable Evans let out a long breath. He looked at Bethany with pure professional disdain. "You told me she attacked you. You filed a formal police complaint, stating she struck you first." "She provoked me!" Bethany shrieked, backing up against the wall of the jet bridge. "She was rude. She didn't listen. She was sitting in her seat," Evans corrected. "And you assaulted her." Evans reached for his belt. He pulled out the handcuffs, the same pair that had been on Aaliyah's wrists moments ago. "Bethany Crisp," Evans said, his voice booming, "you are under arrest for common assault, perverting the course of justice, and filing a false police report." "No!" Bethany screamed as the officer grabbed her arm. "Marcus, do something! Tell them!" Captain Miller looked up. He met Aaliyah's eyes. He saw the cold, hard end of his career staring back at him. "I didn't see it," Miller said quietly. "I was in the cockpit. I only went by what the purser told me." "You coward!" Bethany screamed, thrashing as the cuffs locked around her wrists. "You liar! We drank together. You said we'd get her banned." Aaliyah watched Bethany get dragged away, kicking and screaming, down the jet bridge. It wasn't satisfying in a joyful way. It was just necessary, like cutting out a tumor. She turned to Captain Miller. "Captain," Aaliyah said. "Ms. Vance," Miller stammered, sweating. "I followed protocol. When a senior crew member reports a threat." "Protocol requires you to investigate," Aaliyah cut him off. "Protocol requires you to de-escalate. You authorized the restraint of a passenger who was calm and compliant, based on the word of a woman who was clearly emotional. You denied me access to cameras. You denied me water." She looked at Julian. "Julian, is Captain Miller currently on the active roster?" "Technically, yes, until the flight is closed," Julian said, taking notes furiously. "Captain Miller," Aaliyah said, "you are relieved of duty. Effective immediately. You will not fly the return leg. In fact, you will not fly for Sky Summit ever again. Your contract is terminated for gross negligence and aiding in the assault of a passenger." Miller's jaw dropped. "You can't do that. The union won't touch you with a 10-foot pole when they see that video," Aaliyah said. "Hand over your badge." Trembling, the man who had ruled the skies for 30 years unpinned his wings. He handed them to Aaliyah. He looked small, old, defeated. "Get off my plane," Aaliyah whispered. As Miller walked away, head hung low, the passengers began to deplane. They walked past Aaliyah. Most looked confused. Then Mr. Arthur Sterling appeared. He was adjusting his tie, looking annoyed at the delay. He saw Aaliyah standing there, no longer in cuffs, surrounded by corporate suits. He saw Bethany gone. He froze. Alia stepped into his path. "Mr. Sterling," she said. "I don't want any trouble," Sterling muttered, trying to push past. "You gave a witness statement to the captain," Alia said. "You claimed you saw me strike her. You lied." "I might have been mistaken," Sterling said, his face flushing red. "It was dark. I had a few drinks." "You lied to help a pretty girl who was flirting with you," Alia said, "and that lie led to me being handcuffed for 4 hours." She turned to Julian. "Julian, flag Mr. Sterling's profile." "Done," Julian said. "Mr. Sterling, you are banned from Sky Summit Airways for life," Alia announced. "Your return ticket is cancelled. Your miles are voided. You can find another way back to New York. I suggest a boat. It's slower. Gives you time to think." "You can't do this. Do you know who I am?" Sterling sputtered. "I don't care who you are," Alia said, finally smiling. "I own the airline. Get out." Sterling stormed off, cursing, but powerless. Finally, the plane was empty, except for one person. Sarah, the young flight attendant, stood at the aircraft door. She was holding her bag, looking terrified. She had seen Bethany arrested. She had seen the captain fired. She assumed she was next. She walked up to Alia, her hands shaking. She looked at the bruises on Alia's face. "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered. "I'm so sorry I didn't do more." Alia looked at the young woman. She remembered the water. She remembered the fear in Sarah's eyes and the bravery it took to sneak back there. "Show me your hand," Alia said. Sarah hesitated, then held out her palm. The ink was smudged, but visible. "Case number 409, Alpha Vance." "You followed instructions," Alia said gently. "You were the only person on this crew who acted with humanity." Am I fired?" Sarah asked, tears spilling over. Alia placed a hand on Sarah's shoulder. "No, Sarah. Bethany is fired. Captain Miller is fired. You? You're just getting started." Alia turned to Julian. "Julian, I want Sarah placed on the fast track for purser training, and I want her assigned to my personal flight crew for the return trip next week, with a significant raise." Sarah gasped. "Miss Vance, You did good," Alia said. "Now go home, rest. We have a lot of work to do to fix this airline." 3 months later. The Old Bailey, London. The rain outside the Central Criminal Court in London was torrential, a fitting backdrop for the storm that was about to conclude inside courtroom number 1. The media frenzy had been relentless. The headline, "Billionaire CEO slapped at 30,000 feet," had dominated tabloids on both sides of the Atlantic for 12 weeks straight. What started as a viral moment had turned into a referendum on class, race, and corporate accountability. Inside, the gallery was packed to capacity. Former passengers who had been mistreated by Sky Summit staff sat in the back rows, watching with bated breath. Alia Vance sat in the front row, dressed in an immaculate cream suit, her face unreadable. She wasn't there to gloat. She was there to witness the closing of a circle. In the defendant's box, Bethany Crisp looked like a shadow of the woman who had terrorized Flight 802. The perfectly coiffed blonde bun was gone, replaced by limp, unwashed hair tied back with a cheap elastic. The tight uniform was replaced by a grey jumper. Her skin was sallow, and her eyes darted around the room, filled not with remorse, but with the terrifying realization of consequences. Her defense had been a disaster. Her lawyer had tried to argue that the turbulence caused accidental contact, but the cloud backup video Alia provided had dismantled that lie in seconds. The courtroom had watched, in high-definition silence, as Bethany sneered, struck Alia, and then immediately feigned victimhood. Justice Harrison, a judge known for his zero-tolerance policy on violent conduct, adjusted his spectacles, and looked down at Bethany over the rim of his glasses. The rustling in the courtroom ceased instantly. "Bethany Crisp," Justice Harrison began, his voice echoing off the wood-panelled walls. "In my 30 years on the bench, I have seen many cases of assault. But rarely have I seen one so steeped in arrogance and malice." Bethany trembled, clutching the railing of the dock. "You were a senior flight attendant," the judge continued, his tone withering. "You were entrusted with the safety and dignity of hundreds of people. Instead, you treated your cabin as a personal fiefdom, where you could dispense cruelty at will. You profiled a passenger based on her appearance. You judged her worthy of contempt because she did not fit your narrow definition of wealth, and when she asserted her rights, you resorted to violence." The judge paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "But your crime did not end with the slap. It was the calculated attempt to destroy that passenger's life afterward that is truly chilling. You fabricated a story. You enlisted the captain to illegally restrain a victim. You attempted to delete evidence. If that passenger had been anyone else, anyone without the resources to fight back, you would have succeeded in ruining them. That is a terrifying thought." "I was stressed," Bethany whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't know who she was." "That is exactly the point, Ms. Crisp," Justice Harrison snapped. "You shouldn't need to know someone is a billionaire to treat them with basic human decency. The law does not protect you based on the net worth of your victim." He opened the file in front of him. "For the charge of assault occasioning actual bodily harm and the far more serious charge of perverting the course of justice, I am sentencing you to 18 months in prison." A gasp rippled through the room. Bethany's knees buckled. "You will serve half in custody before being eligible for parole. Take her down." The gavel banged, a sound of finality. Bethany screamed. It wasn't a scream of anger this time. It was a primal sound of despair. "No, please. I can't go to prison. Marcus, somebody help me." But Captain Marcus Miller wasn't there to help her. He was currently facing his own licensing hearing with the Civil Aviation Authority, stripped of his wings and facing a lifetime ban from the cockpit. As the bailiffs dragged a weeping Bethany toward the cells below, Aaliyah stood up. She didn't smile. She buttoned her jacket, turned to her security team, and walked out of the courtroom. The chapter of revenge was closed. The chapter of rebuilding was about to begin. The boardroom, Sky Summit headquarters, New York, 2 weeks later, the atmosphere in the penthouse boardroom of the Sky Summit skyscraper was frigid. The air conditioning was humming, but the chill came from the 20 executives sitting around the long mahogany table. These were the survivors, the VPs and directors who hadn't been fired in the initial purge. They looked at the empty chair at the head of the table with dread. The double doors swung open. Aaliyah Vance walked in. She didn't carry a stack of papers. She carried only a single tablet. She sat down. She didn't say, "Good morning." "The era of Sky Summit is over," Aaliyah said, her voice projecting clear and sharp across the room. She tapped her tablet, and the massive screen on the wall behind her flickered to life. The jagged mountain logo of Sky Summit, a symbol now associated with elitism and abuse, dissolved. In its place appeared a new logo, a stylized, soaring golden bird, wings spread wide in an embrace, set against a deep royal blue. Vance Airways. "We are rebranding," Aaliyah announced. "But this is not just a paint job. We are tearing the culture of this company down to the studs." She stood up and walked slowly around the table, making eye contact with every nervous executive. For years, this airline prioritized profit over people and status over service. You allowed a culture where staff like Bethany Crisp could thrive, because they hit sales targets for duty-free champagne. That ends today. Aaliyah stopped behind the chair of the HR director. We are implementing the Sarah Protocol, named after the only crew member on Flight 802 who acted with integrity. The Sarah Protocol, Aaliyah explained, is a mandatory, anonymous whistleblower system. Any crew member, regardless of rank, can report abuse, discrimination, or safety violations directly to my office. If a junior attendant sees a captain mistreating a passenger, they report it, and we investigate within 24 hours. No retaliation, no cover-ups. Furthermore, Aaliyah continued, returning to the head of the table, we are instituting a zero-tolerance policy for bias. If you treat a passenger in economy with less respect than a passenger in first class, you don't work for Vance Airways. I don't care if you've been here 20 years. You're out. One of the VPs cleared his throat nervously. Ms. Vance, the retraining costs alone, the shareholders might worry about the quarterly dividends. Aaliyah smiled, a shark-like glint in her eyes. I own 85% of the shares. I am the shareholders, and I would rather lose money for a year than run an airline that humiliates its customers. Do we have an understanding? The room nodded in unison. The fear was gone, replaced by a terrified respect. They realized they weren't working for a tech mogul anymore. They were working for a crusader. 1 year later, JFK International Airport. The winter storm was howling outside Terminal 4, sleet hammering against the glass walls. It was the kind of night that usually resulted in delays, frayed tempers, and chaos. But at Gate B22, the mood was strangely calm. The signage above the desk gleamed in royal blue. Vance Airways, Flight 802 to London. Standing at the boarding door was a woman in a pristine, tailored navy blue uniform with gold piping. On her lapel sat the wings of a senior purser. It was Sora. She looked different than she had a year ago. The timidity was gone, replaced by a quiet, capable confidence. She was running the boarding process with the precision of a conductor. Good evening. Welcome aboard, Sarah said, scanning a boarding pass. A young woman approached the gate. She was black, wearing a university hoodie and carrying a backpack that looked heavy. She looked anxious, clutching her ticket tightly, her eyes darting to the sizer bin as if she expected a confrontation. I hope this fits, the young passenger stammered, bracing herself for a reprimand. I can try to check it if... Sarah didn't look at the bag. She looked at the passenger's face. She saw the fear. She recognized it. Sarah smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached her eyes. It's a full flight, but don't you worry. We saved some bin space in the back just for situations like this. You head on board, and if you have trouble, just flag me down. We'll make it work. The passenger's shoulders dropped 3 inches. The tension vanished. Really? Thank you. Thank you so much. My pleasure, Sarah said. Enjoy the flight. As the passenger walked down the jet bridge, Sarah felt a gaze on her. She looked toward the priority lane. Standing there, waiting to board last, was Aaliyah Vance. Aaliyah was dressed casually again, jeans and a blazer, but she carried herself with regal grace. She had been watching the interaction. Sarah nodded respectfully to her boss. Aaliyah nodded back, a look of profound pride on her face. She walked up to the podium and scanned her phone. Good evening, Miss Vance, Sarah said professionally, though her eyes twinkled. Seat 1A is ready for you. We have your sparkling water on ice. Thank you, Sarah, Aaliyah said softly. You're running a tight ship. I learned from the best, Sarah replied. Aaliyah walked down the jet bridge, the sound of her boots echoing on the metal. She thought about Bethany, currently sitting in a cell in Her Majesty's prison, blaming the world for her fate. She thought about the millions of dollars spent on the rebranding. She watched the young student ahead of her, placing her bag in the overhead bin with the help of a smiling flight attendant. No yelling, no handcuffs, no tears. Aaliyah took a deep breath of the recycled air. It didn't smell like jet fuel and fear anymore. It smelled like change. She stepped onto the plane, finding her seat by the window. As the engines roared to life, pushing the aircraft through the storm and up toward the stars, Aaliyah closed her eyes and finally, truly, relaxed. The turbulence was over. And that is the story of how one slap brought down an empire of arrogance. Bethany Crisp thought her uniform gave her the right to judge and hurt others, but she forgot the golden rule. You never know who you are talking to. Aaliyah Vance turned her trauma into a revolution, proving that true power isn't about how loud you can yell, but about how much you can change. Bethany lost her job, her freedom, and her reputation, while Sarah, the one person who showed kindness when it was risky, rose to the top. It's a powerful reminder to all of us. Treat people with respect, not because of who they might be, but because of who you are. Character is how you treat those who can do nothing for you. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more stories like this. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. What would you have done if you were Aaliyah? Would you have fired the captain too? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next story.